Hello, this is a part of wireless attacks video series on securitytube.net, and this particular video is on authentication and association flood attack on IEEE 802.11 wireless LAN networks. Let's have a quick look at association handshake between station and access point. So station first sends probe request and probe response to find out the existence of any SSID and some basic parameters. Once the probe response is received from the access point, station sends the authentication request. To that, access point responds with authentication response. Now in most of the association, the authentication is open authentication. So when access point receives any authentication request, without going into actual authentication challenge response technique, AP simply sends authentication response, because shared key authentication is no longer strong association. So instead of doing shared key authentication, it is always recommended to have an open authentication and then proper higher layer authentication like 802.1x, etc. So after this authentication phase, station sends association request to the access point, to which access point responds with association response. Now in this association request response phase, actually negotiation between data rate, channel and other parameters which are required for the association takes place, and finally the parameters present in association response are the parameters which are negotiated between AP and the end user. And of course, after association, after successful association, the data transfer takes place between station and access point, and this whole association ends with deauthentication frame. Deauthentication frame can be sent by access point or station, vice versa. Anyone is capable of sending deauthentication frame. Now in this whole association handshake, if attacker sends spoofed association request or authentication request to the AP, this kind of attack is known as association flood attack. In association flood attack, attacker spoofs different MAC addresses and it sends n number of requests from n MAC addresses to the access point, association request. Or also there is authentication flood attack, in which attacker spoofs authentication request and sends flood to access point. Now how exactly this association flood attack works? Every access point maintains a state table to store the associated station's information, so that access point can track that station A is authenticated but not yet associated, station B is associated, so now any data transfer can start between station B. To maintain all this information, every access point maintains a state table. Now the attacker very exploits this state table, because the state table will have a finite memory and access point at a time can support some finite number of clients. Now if attacker sends n number of association requests to the access point, spoofing n number of MAC addresses, then after a certain limit, the access point's data structures will overflow and the access point will no longer able to serve the n+1th client. And once this table is full, any further association is rejected by the AP, and thus the denial of service is happening for any further association, and that's exactly the association flood or authentication flood attack. So that, or in other words, the association flood attack can be defined as flood the association table of the access point, so that access point will not be able to serve any more clients. Now how can one prevent such association flood or authentication flood attacks? The ideal point for preventing such attacks is the access point end. So at the access point, if one employs some algorithm so that one will be able to detect such floods, the algorithm can be as simple as do not accept any association if the last association request was received in n seconds. So it is similar to targeting, which is applied in email servers or email clients. So if email server is getting bombarded with lots of spam emails, then email server will simply introduce a delay of some seconds for delivering the mails. And with this targeting technique, most of the spams are avoided. Similarly, you can apply this targeting technique in access point as well, or you can use the administrator can monitor that which all association were lasting for very small amount of time, and then probably change the access control list or something. But again, this changing access control list is not a very strong mechanism, because MAC address spoofing is another attack which I will be talking about in some other videos. So ACL is not very strong technique, but still you can use the access control list to avoid unwanted association. It is possible that you go with shared key authentication, but it is not recommended to go with shared key authentication, as open association is the thing which is always recommended, because shared key has some other exploits and some other problems. Again, 802.1x or employing 802.1x will not help much, because in wireless the authentication and association is the first phase, and any higher layer authentication like 802.1x only takes place after the association is established between access point and client. Now, detecting of these attacks is very easy, because you can simply sniff the packets and find out that only association packets are coming from so and so MAC, and no further data packets are coming. So surely there is a possibility that so and so MAC is a fake MAC and it is the attacked device. But it is not very easy to prevent unless you employ some algorithm at the access point's end itself. That's it for association flood video. Feel free to browse more videos on wireless attacks. Thank you.